Today's episode is sponsored by Birthing of Giants.
But that's what makes it better, and it just only makes your relationship and this venture so much stronger. But without 100% trust and zero ego, it's not going to work.
Hey everybody, welcome to another season of the Rocket Fuel podcast, where visionary and integrator duos from entrepreneurial companies share a behind-the-scenes look at their relationship. These amazing leaders blend their unique skills to create Rocket Fuel. I'm your host, Mark C. Winters, co-author of Rocket Fuel and an expert EOS implementer. Today, I'm thrilled to be talking with Meg Carpenter and Katie Johnson of Ficomm Partners, champion problem solvers who transform RIAs and wealth asset managers through multidisciplinary and human-first marketing strategies. Meg acts as CEO and visionary, having co-founded Ficomm in 2012 after years in business development. Katie serves as the president and integrator with over 20 years of experience in communication strategies and employee management. In this episode, we'll explore how having the right person in the wrong seat impacts the visionary integrator relationship and company culture. Meg and Katie also share their insights into balancing a friendship and a business partnership and how it's helped them both become better humans. We're kicking off the conversation with Meg discussing the challenges of switching integrators and her initial struggles with the visionary integrator relationship. Let's jump in. Hey everybody, today I have the pleasure of speaking with Meg Carpenter and Katie Johnson from Ficomm. Ficommers are passionate, creative, problem-solving champions of the industry. They are committed to transforming wealth management and help the best RIAs, asset managers, and wealth management platforms grow. From New York City to Orange County and many places in between, they bring trust, transparency, and authenticity to every client relationship. So, Meg and Katie, thanks for being here and welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hello, Mark. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you both and see what places our conversation might take us. So before we jump in too far, though, Meg, I have a question for you. So Katie's not your first integrator. So tell me about what happened in that integrator seat before Katie.
We started on EOS. Katie, do you know, is it 5 years ago?
So.
It was before your time, but I think, probably about 5 years ago. So I'm actually on integrator number 2 and implementer number 2.
Okay.
And I think that what we experienced, what I really experienced was that it's so important to have core values really well defined and integrated in and across the business. And ultimately, the former integrator that I worked with and I just did not have cultural alignment. Mm-hmm. And so that got to a point where it's unsustainable. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm sure it probably was uncomfortable for both of you.
Yes.
Would that be a fair statement? So,
yes.
So when you start feeling that, well, let's back up just a little bit. So where did they come from? So where did that first integrator even come from? How did you get connected with them?
Well, so she was employed at Ficomm before we started EOS. So her role was not to be, I didn't hire her to be the integrator. She was sort of the number 2 person at the company. Mm-hmm. And so when we decided as an organization to launch EOS and started working with an implementer, given her skill set and my skill set, it made sense for her to step into the integrator role in addition to, what she was doing day to day.
So then you get into the relationship and, things aren't feeling right? The core values, when they don't align just right, you can typically, that's a very, it's a feeling thing. You can sense it, you can see it, right? It just kind of shows up and it starts to get uncomfortable. So you realize this and you do what?
Well, I think every entrepreneur and business owner and also anyone on a leadership team has the experience of you often know what you need to do long before you sometimes do what you need to do because there's a lot of, uncertainty and people are people and I care about people and there's some fear associated with making changes, especially on the leadership team. And you've got clients and you've got people to take care of. And so hindsight's always, it's much easier to say, looking back, well, I knew what I needed to do long before I did what I needed to do. But I think that that's a reality that many of us live in day to day. So ultimately, it just came down to having to have the tough conversation around, like, are our values aligned? are you the right person for this role? How are we seeing that, or how are we not seeing that? And, given the truths, what do we need to do to move forward? And ultimately it was the right decision for both of us, as it typically turns out when you have mismatch of values and you have, wrong people, right seats, right people, wrong seats. It always works better to get people in the right place. And so it happened to be at a time where Katie was thinking about making a transition from her former place of employment. Katie and I have been friends for over 20 years. I've long wanted to work with Katie. And so it felt like the time was right and that was a sort of another reason that I think I gained some confidence to do what I should have done with the former integrator, because I knew that I had the right integrator on the other side.
Got it. So you feel, you mentioned the word fear, which is very real and very common, right? So we get in that tough people situation, and for all a variety of reasons, it's like, oof, should I do it? It's going to hurt. Is it the right thing to do? And all of those things. So you get some confidence because you know Katie. Now there's an opportunity that you can kind of make that change that sort of spurred you on. Before we move on to Katie, looking back on the situation with the prior integrator, I love to ask this question. Let's see if you answer it like a lot of other people do. If there was one thing you could do differently about it, what would it be? If you had that whole first integrator situation to do over again, if you could do one thing differently, what would it be?
It's tough, Mark, because I think part of it is, for us, EOS was new. And so we were learning and growing into it. And a big part of EOS, which is why you're doing this podcast, is the visionary integrator relationship. Mm-hmm. But it's all new, it's all new concepts. And so I think that I think it would have taken time to just understand what the role was and what was needed and expected out of the role. And so I'm not sure that I would have done anything differently. I think even, forget about whether or not she was the integrator. I think anytime you have a person at the business who's not aligned with your core values, what I would have done differently is I would have acted faster.
Yeah, that's what I was anticipating you were going to say. But I love what you said before that, which is basically you had to learn. You had to learn certain things in order to be able to make the decision that you ultimately made, right? And that's true. We can't forget that, right? We don't know everything, and frankly, that's a big reason for this podcast, is to help us try to learn a little bit from each other. Mm-hmm. So we don't all have to suffer through the same mistakes every single time. So perfect. All right. So Katie, you are out there doing your thing, whatever it is. You've been friends with Meg for a long time, and then you get the call or email or however it happened to come down, and she says, "Hey, Katie, have you thought about?" And so talk to me a little bit from your seat about how that all went down.
Yes, well, it definitely wasn't just one email or call. It was multiple over the course of at least 2 years. And so, what had originally, my career journey, I had helped build a company that was acquired by Goldman Sachs. And so in that, Meg called me when that acquisition, because it was, well known in the wealth management space. She called me that day and said, "Celebrating you, and let's talk." And so, we just started talking, and then I had made the decision, what's best for me and my family, to stay on at Goldman for a couple more years. But I knew that I wanted to end up at Ficomm. So that was my goal. It was a part of my career journey. I had always worked in smaller boutique businesses, and helped build that. And I always thought, what would it be like to work at a very large company? And so Goldman was going to give me that opportunity and that experience. And I learned quickly. I loved Goldman. I think if I would have started my career at Goldman, I would have been a lifer. It's wonderful people, smart people doing great things, but I miss that entrepreneurial-like spirit. So I quickly knew, probably within a few months, that sure, I have these golden handcuffs. I need to stick around for 2 years, but my long-term plan is I would love to land at Ficomm. And so that's really where the conversations had. And so Meg was very transparent. And I think that's really the foundation of our relationship, is that transparency with one another. There was one point, probably a year into that 2-year sprint, where, she had shared with me, we made the business decision, we're implementing, EOS across the org, explained to me a little bit about what it was. And she said, as part of this, I need to have someone in this integrator seat, and obviously she said, I know where you are, but I want to give you the opportunity to put your name, in the hat. And I couldn't do it just based on what, we had made a decision as a family. And so Meg was very transparent with me and said, hey, I'm going to move forward with the person internally to put them in this role. And, I celebrated it, but it was like, let's just continue to talk about it.
Right.
And then through that, I actually, over that course the integrator had started, I had actually met with the integrator because the long-term plan was that I would love to land at Ficomm in a couple of years. So Meg said, let's just continue the conversation. I was going out to New York a lot. She was in New York. So I went to lunch with the integrator, was really impressed with the business that was being built by Ficomm, and it just reinforced wanting to be a part of it. And so it was interesting as Meg and I started, continuing to talk about what that role is. And I, separately with Meg and her previous integrator talking about it, the integrator had actually brought my name up as, wow, could I be a solution to her replace? So that it was a little bit serendipitous and beautiful in that sense, because it was truly meant to be. And I think we all, including the former integrator, she is someone we still speak to often. We leverage her because she is amazing and she has zones of excellence that we do not hear. And so we tap into that still to this day. And so it was just something to be celebrated. And it just kind of came full circle that it was like, okay, this is the right role for me and for Ficomm.
So Meg, back to you. One of the dynamics I see a lot is we get anxious to make a hire. We get anxious to, make the pain go away of either having the wrong person there or not having anybody there. And it's all on our plate. And we know that if we don't solve this quick, more's coming on our plate. And so that shows up in the visionary getting an integrator as well. So, here you've got history. I'm sure there's trust there. It's got this feeling of it's just all kind of flowing. It's just like kind of all it's kismet. It's meant to be. It's, whatever you want to say about it. Was there something, knowing what it feels like to be wrong and knowing what it feels like to have made a mistake and kind of the pain and frustration that goes with that, was there anything in particular you were really trying to vet or just make darn sure that, that this piece of it is right before you actually made it official and said, all right, Katie's going to be the integrator? Was there something you were looking for there?
Well, first of all, I've made so many mistakes, so I'm quite familiar with that.
Haven't we all?
And I still do every day. That's how we learn. I think that I had gotten to the point in my career. So Katie joined 3 years ago, 2021, about 9 years into being an entrepreneur. And I think when I originally became an entrepreneur, I had a lot of confidence in my people management capabilities because I'm a people person and I care very deeply about people and I have strong natural leadership capabilities. And so I thought that meant that I was a good manager. And the truth is I'm a terrible manager. No surprise for all the visionaries out there. But at 9 years into having run my own business and having enough mistakes and enough people failures, I was fairly self-aware at that point that that was an area of deficiency for me, is that I definitely needed someone. And so we're a professional services business. So much of what we do is dependent on our people. And so when I think about integrator, being able to sort of integrate the vision of the business, so much of that has to do with people. And so that was one of the reasons that I reached out to Katie to begin with, is she's got a really strong organizational management and people development background. She likes to say she collects people. She's a really incredible leader and manager, does so much to help people develop in their own individual career tracks, build teams that support companies at scale. So I don't think that I had to really vet it because that's who she is. And that was her track record of success. And so that was one of the reasons that I was originally so eager to have the conversation with Katie, because I knew that was an area that it was a gap. And the former integrator, that wasn't, she was filling other gaps, but not that one. And so much of what I believe about being an entrepreneur and a business owner is that I've got this tremendous responsibility to create an amazing work environment and to be really thoughtful about the culture of the business. I'm a working mom. I have 3 young children. And whether it's for kids or for pets or for caring for parents or loved one, whatever it is, like we've all got stuff. And so felt like it was really important for me to have a culture that I wanted to be a part of and that I was really proud of. And so I knew that having that people element was critical. And so it was more so that like Katie had already demonstrated all of those things that made it the conversation, I think, in the outreach really logical and intentional.
So you mentioned culture. So let's jump in on that for a sec. So did you always feel like the emphasis on culture was so important, or did that sort of evolve over time?
I think it evolved over time. I think that I grew up, and Katie as well. I mean, we've grown up as women in financial services, which is primarily an all male culture. And I didn't grow up in the industry or in my career in great cultures. So no, I don't think when I started my own business that I even knew what culture was or what a good culture was. I just never really experienced it. And an interesting part of my story is that I was 50-50. I had a 50-50 partnership with my former business partner who I bought out of the business in 2018. And one of the reasons that he and I parted ways is because it was a terrible culture, just terrible. I mean, I hated it. I had anxiety about so many things. I couldn't sleep. I was stressed. It was a toxic culture. We had terrible Glassdoor reviews. We had an open, our back door was bigger than our front door when it came to recruiting people. We just couldn't retain people. So I learned through a lot of pain about the importance of culture. And it is naturally aligned to me and who I am as a person. However, it just took me, it takes time to sort of grow the confidence in yourself to believe in who you are and to believe that it's okay to be who you are, and that you and that I could build something based on who I personally was and what I believe in and what I think is right and the type of culture that I'm proud of. So it was an evolution.
Got it. Perfect story arc there. So you've been friends for a long time. How long?
20 years.
Since 2002, 22 years.
Yeah, but who's counting? So 22 years. So, sometimes business-ship and friendship doesn't mix very well. Katie, were you concerned about that at all? That, we get into this and what's it going to do to our friendship? How'd you think about it?
Of course, it's something new, but I think it was more a growth mindset approach to it, where I knew it would maybe look different. However, I felt like the relationship Meg and I have always had is one based on transparency and trust. We've always been very candid with each other. We've seen, she was at my bachelorette party. We were at each other's weddings, 18 years ago. We've seen each other become parents. We are very different from who we are today than and I actually am getting chills just thinking about it, than who we were then. And it's
Thank God.
awesome. Yeah. Thank God. We were very fun though. We were
really fun.
We were very fun. But I do think we're much better humans. We're much less, we're more selfless. We take more of a human approach. We're much more real with each other, rather than, when you're early on and everything's perfect, everything's great. It's like, that's not reality. And then life hit Meg and I, and we're like, oh, now we need to sit in this messy middle. So of course, I was never hesitant about moving forward, but it was like, what is this going to look like? And, I do think Meg and I have had to find our way, over the last 3 years and be very intentional. I think the first year, we would catch ourselves like almost acting like friends. And it's, rather than like, nope, now we need to put on our business hat and we need to look at the business. And there's, like even a conversation we had this morning where we were just very honest with each other, but we have to hold each other accountable too. And these are just things that I think make our friendship even more beautiful than it was 20 something years ago.
Cool. So you used the word or the phrase, we're better humans. And I know that your focus is
April captured it as humanizing the profession of wealth advice. So is that related? So your personal evolution of kind of becoming better humans, is that kind of related to why that's a focus for the firm? Meg, talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we have the privilege of having spent a good amount of time in this industry and having seen the impact that a really good financial advisor has on the lives of the clients that they serve. And Katie and I both each have our own individual stories of how we grew up and the role that money played in the lives of our families and what that meant to us. And really everybody has a money story that they bring forward with them to adulthood. And I don't think that either Katie or I would ever want to be a financial advisor because that's just not suited to our unique abilities. But we do believe very much in this industry that we've both grown up in, and we're quite passionate about helping great financial advisors and advisory firms grow so that they can ultimately serve more people. That shows up in a lot of our volunteer work and in, where we donate money from a philanthropy perspective. So it is, we think, and this sort of relates to also how we approach marketing, like we think the best businesses are those that are really heart-centered and human first in their approach, because the best way to develop meaningful connection with the people that you seek to serve is by showing up authentically and vulnerably as yourself so that you can make a really meaningful connection. And so, yes, like showing up as humans and thinking about how we can be better humans, that's clearly core to who we both are as women and moms and spouses and daughters and friends and sisters. And so it absolutely bleeds over into how we've built this business. And like I said, we've seen it time and time again. It's really hard for a consumer to connect with a financial services business that uses a lot of jargon and performance measurements and tries to show up like credibility first instead of human first. That's why financial services can be viewed as somewhat exclusive, because it feels like it's only for the ultra wealthy or the ultra affluent. You can't help me, and so we take that responsibility seriously, and it cuts across the culture of the business and the type of people that we want to surround ourselves with.
Right.
So Katie, was that part of what drew you to the business?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, over the course of my career, and I'm very transparent with everyone and kind of have shared my struggle of my career journey, because that's really, I like to put on my coaching, focus on the people and bring out greatness. I always feel like that's like my number one job as a leader, is to like find that one thing that's buried in someone and pull it out. And, during my career, really, my son, Asher, he'll be 13 in a month, which I can't believe, by the way, that I'm going to have a teenager. But we're already there as a teenager attitude, but hey, I love him to death. So, but what's interesting is when I first became a mom, I tried so hard to separate the two. I honestly thought that becoming a parent was going to be career suicide. I thought I was as far as I would go on that career ladder, and it was just done. And so when I became a mom, I tried to compartmentalize who I was as a parent, and then, the Katie that was showing up at work every day. And after probably a year and a half of stumbling and being exhausted, I realized like this isn't going to work for everyone. And so I just started to kind of lean in, and I still work on it today, but I feel like I've come a long way. I find that, where we should be saying yes to our immediate family, like my partner and my children, where we're normally saying yes is work out here, and you really need to flip the two. So I've been, trying to be intentional over that. And I found Ficomm was very much that we lead with that. Like who you are as a person is more important to us than what you're going to give Ficomm. Like, how are you going to approach it? What are you passionate about? Like pulling that out. Like, are you a parent? Are you a dog parent? Do you have hobbies and passions outside of the workplace? Like, we want to look at the person and take a holistic approach, because we feel like if people are passionate with what they're doing and they can show up as their true authentic self, the bottom line is going to benefit. And so it was very, very much aligned with that. Not only of, it was twofold. It was one from a personal standpoint, is Meg and Ficomm going to embrace me for who I am and where I am on this like parent journey. And Second, are we going to be a culture that allows others to do the same? Because often you see leadership team may be one way, they say one thing, but then you get down to, the rest of the team and they're like, that's not what actually is happening. And so I feel like we really created a culture of that, just to really support people who they are and how they want to grow.
Visionaries, you've built a great company using EOS. So what's next? Are you happy to stay small or do you want to go big? Join other successful visionaries for a week-long business owner boot camp that leverages EOS and other growth principles such as capital market readiness and revenue amplification. Add millions to your company's value by studying the roadmaps of successful post-exit entrepreneurs. Head over to birthingofgiants.com/EOS and schedule a call with a board member right now.
So Meg, you'd already started your EOS journey, obviously before Katie came on the scene. So you'd gone through the process of answering the, what we call the 8 questions on the VTO, particularly, core values, core focus, 10-year target, your marketing strategy, your 3-year picture. So you had done that. So as Katie gets on, did that change? Did that morph at all? Did it evolve at all? And talk about how that structure helped you and Katie kind of communicate, maybe to get some of the stuff out of your brain into a little bit more structured format that we could move forward with.
Yeah, it absolutely changed. I think the biggest, most immediate change was needing to have clarity around core values. When we started EOS with our first implementer, we created the core values as a leadership team. There were only 3 of us on the leadership team, including my former integrator. And so it was sort of a consensus process for creating core values. And so the core values weren't actually aligned to, who I was. And so I think that was the first sort of immediate, because Katie and I are so aligned culturally and believe the same things about what's important, what priorities are, the type of business that we wanted to build, the type of environment that we wanted to build, core values. We had to take a look at those and sort of start from there. And then also the real focus on, it's one thing to say that you want to have a great culture, but it has to be built and it has to be inherent to who you are as a leadership team and how you show up every day. And you have to be consistently looking at it over time, and you have to have the right sort of framework and structure in place to be able to actually have the culture be the living, sort of breathing representation of the business. And so I think a lot of the goals changed. I think a lot of the areas of focus, the rocks really did shift quickly once Katie joined, to like, how do we get this culture to a place that we can be really proud of? How do we move from a place where our employee retention was very bad to a place where our employee retention is now very good. We were spending a ton of money working with recruiters. We had a hard time getting people to come and work for us. And now with Katie having been here for 3 years, we haven't worked with a recruiter for 2 years. We are now an attraction brand. We have people emailing us and saying, hey, when you have an opening, I'd like to join your company because of what I see. So I think in addition to the values, a lot of it was focused, an evolved focus on people and culture.
Nice. I love that. So, Katie, for you, a lot of times the integrator role, being the number 2 and kind of having to deal with a lot of the tough conversations and saying no and being more of the internal face probably than the external face. Some people really struggle with that. It's tough for them. So talk to me about how that shows up for you. Is that really tough for you, or are you just wired that way?
Yes and no. So there's certain parts of the role that are extremely tough for me. So just high level, I'm pretty self-aware. I've always figured out what, from a high level standpoint, like what I want to be. And it has always been, I just want to be the highest number 2, period. I have had no desire to carry the burden of being a number 1. And, working for a company for 13 years that was being built, so I joined the first year in. So it was basically a startup when I joined, and seeing the burden that was carried on the shoulders of the number 1, I said, no, thank you. That is not my zone of excellence. I come up with great ideas, but I am not the big idea person. That's not my area of expertise. What I love to do is, witness greatness of coming up with the ideas and then me help implement that greatness. So like, I just naturally knew I'd always want to be a number 2. Like that is just, it was like COO type role, that kind of thing. So that was very easy for me. I had no, desire to be a number 1, so that I really didn't have an ego coming in of like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to take second seat. Like that was just something I didn't struggle with. However, what I do struggle with is I'm very much a people pleaser, based on my childhood background, who I am as a person. I want to be loved. I've gone through therapy. I've talked about it all. I know I am this way, but it is still something that I want to do. So saying no to people and holding people accountable for things is something that is probably a daily challenge that I'm constantly working on. And while I'd love to say I figured it out, it's still something that I'm working on. I feel like I've come a long way, but I still got work to do there. So the saying no part is, it's interesting because there are certain things I have zero, as Meg will laugh, like I have zero issues of saying nope. That's not happened. But there's other things where I feel like if someone's going to like me less, or like it's going to impact like a perception of me personally, that's where it's very hard for me to say no.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I love your self-awareness there. And, it's hard to reconcile the two sometimes, right? That actually saying the thing that's hard for someone to hear, or that may make them not like us, is actually the best thing for them too.
Yeah.
It's not only the best thing for the business, but it may be the best thing for them too. So, Meg, was it surprising to you when you discovered that there was actually somebody else out there that wanted to be the highest number 2, that wasn't like fighting to be the highest number 1, but they had kind of a different target in mind? Sometimes that's really surprising for a visionary to find out. Was that for you?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think that I don't really believe in hierarchy. So I understand like why people say visionary number 1, integrator number 2, but I don't necessarily agree that it's a number 1, number 2 thing. Like I don't think you have either without the other. So I think that they're equally important. And so I guess in that way, no surprises. I think that it has been wildly beneficial for me to have someone who so unconditionally supports me and sees the burden and sees the challenges and how lonely it can be as an entrepreneur. And I mean, Katie just really is always recognizing and acknowledging a lot of the pain and a lot of the hardship and a lot of just the isolation that exists when you're a business owner. And I think that that's probably what was a little bit more unexpected. And obviously Katie and I have known each other for over 20 years and we're really good friends. And so we've always had that support mechanism as friends. But to sort of have the support mechanism between visionary and integrator has really elevated me. Like my ability to step into my power as an entrepreneur and to really benefit from being a business owner, and which is, benefiting from a lot of the sacrifice that's made over the years. Like that level of support and encouragement is immeasurable beyond words.
So let me grab onto something there. So when you think about the last 3 years, okay, so since Katie has come into the role, think about how your life was at that moment in time and think about how your life is right now. If you were going to kind of boil that down, what's the biggest difference for you personally?
Oh my gosh, there's like so many. I mean, like there's so many. I think I'm a different, not that I'm a different person, but I think I'm living a better life. Mm-hmm. I sleep better. I'm healthier. I'm more confident. I'm less stressed. Things that the business don't affect me in the same way that, it used to be like such like personal attacks when things didn't go wrong. I felt like I was personally failing or that I was a bad person or that I didn't know what I was doing or whatever. And I think that having that level of support has really changed. I mean, when Katie came on board, we actually had to accelerate her coming on board a little bit because I was having my 3rd child, and it's hard for an entrepreneur to be able to take time off when you have things happen in life because you're wearing a lot of hats. And we had gotten to a better place in the business when I had my first son. I think I took 4 or 5 weeks off, which felt like huge. It felt like, how could I possibly take another day off? And I remember I flew to San Francisco to speak at an event when my son was like 4.5 weeks old. And I remember being on stage and being like, this is actually dangerous. Like, why am I here? Like, I was lightheaded and I hadn't recovered, physically. And so when Katie started, one of the things that she was really intentional about is like, you're going to take a proper maternity leave because I've got you and I've got this business, which was, and she like, there's no way you actually could have, Katie, because you were like a month. Yeah. And you were like a month into the business, but it didn't matter because you did. And it was really just like having someone who could just like step in and step up and say like, hey, I don't really know all the things because I'm new here, but we're going to figure this out so that Meg can have this time. I mean, that's the most incredible gift that anyone could give you. So I think that, to boil that all down, I think that I'm happier and I'm a better leader.
Yeah. What a cool message and cool feeling that, I've got you. Mm-hmm. I love that. That's fantastic. Okay. So Katie, in the pre-call, my producer, you said something that made her laugh, and she said, I had to ask you about it. Uh-oh. And so you must tell me about the inner Karen.
The inner Karen.
Karen.
So this is part of my self-awareness journey, Mark. So this is all the people-pleasing tendencies that I have. So going back to what I was sharing earlier is I had an epiphany probably about a year ago. It was actually at an EOS quarterly session. And I'm just, again, because I want to feel loved, I am a perfectionist at heart. I am a high achiever, that anytime I feel that someone is questioning me, I feel like I'm an idiot. I'm stupid. I don't know what I'm talking about. Or I go on the defense. Like I literally have, and Meg knows it. She sees it. She's called me out on it. But ever since I figured out and identified my inner Karen, I am identifying it myself. So Meg had helped me on that journey of being self-aware that you literally have a physical response where everyone in the room knows what you're thinking. And so it was interesting. I was trying to figure out a way, because I always try to go to a toolbox and create a tool of like, okay, well, what can I do about it? I just don't want to sit in this and be like, well, that's who I am. This is what I'm going to be dealing with for the rest of my life. And so I just kind of thought about like, I'm just going to name her. And so I was like, Karen. It's Karen. So I know, and it's so funny. Now it's like I have been able to physically separate myself from Katie and Karen, that like we'll be in meetings and Meg see me and I'm like, oh, Karen's getting a little over here. Karen's getting a little uncomfortable. And for me, because I'm someone that leads with humor. It's just how I process things. And it works for me. I know sometimes it probably makes people uncomfortable because they're like, how could you possibly be laughing at that? But it's just something that works for me. So everyone just needs to deal with it. But I have just found ever since that a year ago when I identified the Karen, and I came back to the leadership team and I just owned it. And I said, everybody, I am naming it. I am seeing when it's happening. Because I literally feel it. I get hot. I get, just kind of like tense, anxious, whatever that looks like. And ever since then, it's just, I find humor in it. And I have just been and now it's been nice because I'm also seeing it at home. And I'm seeing it, I'm like, well, it's not me. That's Karen, and it's just been able to just kind of separate the two. And of course I need to like own Karen's behavior. So I do come back and like, I'll apologize, but it's made me help with my confidence too, that this is just a reaction. It's not reality, and Karen's crazy. So Karen can go over there and, Katie can show up. But like when Karen pops up, I need to own it. So
love that. That's so powerful. Naming the thing, making it visible.
Yes.
So have you gone so far? And I see this among some VI duos where they sort of have a secret code between them, a little communication thing, where when you start doing the thing, they're kind of like, they have a sign or something that they put out that to sort of secretly remind you that, okay, it's happening. maybe even before you see it.
We've never even talked about it, but I've known Meg for so long. She just does this thing with her eyes where I'm like, whoo, Karen, whoo.
There it is.
Sit down.
There it is.
There's no code needed. It's all nonverbals.
You're doing it. You're doing it.
And it's so funny. No one else in the room would know. Like there's even times where, Meg will be feeling one way and I'm just like looking at her. I'm like, yep, we're just going to solve for this.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah. So, okay. So tying it back to your friendship. So you've been friends for a long time. You do this VI duo thing, you're having great success. You're getting really good at it. How has this changed your friendship?
I think it's actually given us more opportunities to spend time together. So I think that in a way it's created a stronger bond because we're both for years have been in sort of really intense roles, and careers in our professional lives have been a big part of what we've done. And so that is what we commit to in our daily lives between family and career. And we've been equally focused on both. And so because of that, when we're in separate places and separate businesses, that just doesn't give you as much time to be together, because Katie and I really do both prioritize family and spend as much time as possible with family, which leaves less time to have friendships outside of work. So I think it's been additive because it's sort of like, well, we didn't get to see each other that often before, and now we get to see each other every day. Like that's pretty cool. And there's been movement. She used to be in Portland. I used to be in Washington, D.C. I was then in LA. She was in Orange County. We're now finally both in Orange County. And so we've also had opportunities to get together as families more often than we had in the past. I just had the entire leadership team over to my house on Sunday, and we went for a walk with my kids into a park and had dinner outside with my family and ice cream. And Katie was there and has seen my kids grow up. And I think that that's actually been strengthened because we just have the physical proximity and the daily connection to one another that we didn't necessarily have before.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got lots of visionaries and integrators listening, and they're learning from all your stories. They're learning from your experiences already. But if you could boil it down to, hey, if somebody had told me at the beginning this about, being a visionary, or this about being an integrator, or this about making the relationship work, what's one nugget of wisdom that you wish someone had shared with you earlier that might help them?
I think it sort of goes back to what I said about how impactful Katie has been on my life. I think for me, it took me a long time in my career to recognize that my inherent strengths were strengths, and that it was okay to double down on those strengths. And it was also okay, therefore, to have weaknesses and to not be good at things, and that I didn't have to be good at everything. And so I think for me as a visionary, where I've really flourished and grown into the role is like, not only is it okay to be the visionary, it's required. Like the business needs someone who's constantly looking out to the horizon and thinking about what's next, and having those big ideas that sometimes feel endless, that, it's not expected, it's needed. And so I think that recognition of like, yeah, it's good to be me. Like me being me is what this business needs. And then having an integrator and Katie, who is someone who I just so inherently trust and admire and respect, but who really elevates me into the visionary role because she's so strong in the integrator role. It goes far beyond business impact. It really has tremendous personal impact too. So that's what I would hope for others. If you're feeling like I know sometimes visionaries feel bad. It's like, gosh, I have these ideas and I don't want to take them to the team because they're just going to roll their eyes at me and they're just going to say, stop bringing me these ideas. And that can sort of get in your head, like, well, is that bad? So that would be my hope, is that other visionaries can be like, yeah, like this is amazing. This is what the business needs, but you can't really do that unless you're fully supported by an integrator that you have that level of trust and respect with.
Very good. Love that. Katie, what about you?
Yeah, I was going to lead with, you need to have between the two 100% trust and zero ego, like hands down. If you don't have that, And, if there's ever a point in because obviously, not everyone is lucky enough to know someone for 20 something years and have them move into this integrator seat. But as soon as you can build rapport, credibility, and trust with one another, the better. And when it's not there, and there's times, where Meg and I, there may be a little bit messy middle, then sit in it and talk about it and then move forward. And, sure, Karen comes out in those moments, but that's what makes it better. And it just only makes your relationship and this venture so much stronger. But without 100% trust and zero ego, it's not going to work.
I think that's the perfect point to wrap up on. 100% trust and zero ego. Really, really cool. So, excellent conversation today. Very, very interesting. Lots of lessons, lots of things people can learn from. So, before I wrap it up here, if folks want to learn more about you or your business, what's the best place for them to find out and get in touch?
The best place to go is to our website, which is ficommpartners.com. That's FICOMM partners.com. And if you go to the team page, you can find bios for both Katie and myself, and our LinkedIn profiles are linked from our bio pages. So if you want to reach out, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn.
Super cool. Super cool. Well, my gratitude to both of you for taking some time to spend with us. And I know you've helped some of our listeners. So that's the whole idea here, right? Is how can we learn from each other so we get there faster and maybe with a little bit less pain. So I'm grateful to you for that. And, same thing for our listeners. I'm grateful to you as well, taking your time to listen to our little show here. And if you like it and if you think it's helpful, tell somebody about it. If you leave us a review or let somebody else know, that's how they find out, and maybe we can help them as well. So until our next episode, thanks to Meg and Katie, and we will see you next time. Until then, go Rocket. Hey, everybody. So great conversation with Meg and Katie. And so now let's go to the Rocket Fuel Toolbox. Anchor things back to the tools. So a couple of things that popped up for me in this one. So the first one is really a comment that Katie made around, not Katie, Meg made it actually around hierarchy. I was asking Katie about being the number two and how she felt about that. And then I wanted to kind of get Katie's side of it. And she says, I really don't see it that way. I don't see it as a number one and number two. And so, that's one of the beautiful things about the accountability chart is it really isn't about hierarchy. It is about accountability. It is about having clear groupings of what needs to get done and specifically who's going to do it and specifically who they're going to be accountable to for those things. But it's not about levels and entitlement and titles and all that kind of stuff that so many companies get tripped up in, right? Because they've got an org chart and that's really all they've got on there is it's the associate director of blah, 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 or the vice president of blah, blah. And right. And it's those kinds of things which people interpret in, I don't know, a dozen different ways because of the companies they've been at in their own experience. And so it's different than the dozen different ways that someone else interprets them because of the experiences that they've had. And so it gets all twisted up and confused. And so simplifying those things and just being really clear that we're focused on what it is that we're responsible for taking care of and being great at, and then who it is we're accountable to for those things, and then communication flowing freely all across the accountability chart. So that's the accountability chart tool. The second one that jumped out pretty strongly in this episode was around core values. So Meg talked about how the first integrator wasn't really a culture fit, wasn't a core values fit. And then she further got into the way that they formed the core values initially, small leadership team, sort of a consensus approach, and it really didn't reflect her core values. It wasn't strong enough, with the way that she saw the world and the way that she wanted her culture in her company to be. And so that's really important that voice is there and it's appropriately represented. And so as it came out, of course, she is strongly aligned with Katie. And so the two of them, that was one of the things they went to work on, was revisiting those and making sure that they accurately reflect the core values that exist in that leadership of this business. And then they look to draw more people to them that are like that and keep people away from them who are not like that. So that was a very important tool for them in their journey. And then finally, the last tool I want to point to is LMA. So leadership, management, and accountability. And, Meg made the statement that, she's a terrible manager. Now, Is she really a terrible manager? She's probably managed lots of people along the way, and she's probably had to learn to do it and probably been pretty good at it, but it's probably takes a lot of energy, right? It's not easy for her. It's not natural for her, where it's much more natural for others. And, typically the integrator is great at it. And, they need to be the strongest example, frankly, in the organization, certainly on the leadership team, for what great LMA looks like. And then you look at Katie's comments around that, and she talks about how, look, just because I do it and I'm good at it doesn't mean that, I like it. It's not fun to tell somebody something that they don't want to hear. And so she's working on that. She can easily say no to something. No, that's a bad idea. No, whatever. But she's still, the personal part of the session, that's still going on in her brain. And she's reconciling how, telling something that they don't want to hear in the end is good for them, because it's good for the company, and it's what's good for the company generally creates more opportunity, and it's better for us. We get more of what we want by getting more from the business and creating additional opportunity there. So, she's working through that, and nobody wants to be a bad person. Nobody wants to be disliked, but that integrator role, it has that superpower of being able to step into that situation and do what needs to be done and have the conversation that needs to be had. And many of those are what really creates the accountability in the organization. So clear expectations and consistent accountability, top to bottom, side to side through that organization. Ultimately, that is what's driving your culture, specifically as that accountability comes back on, the GWC of the roles that the people sit in and core values. So that's what I got for you in the toolbox today. So love it if you'd go to rocketfueluniversity.com. If you haven't already, take the Crystallizer assessment. See how you're wired. See if this is something that could help you in your business. Are you a visionary? Are you an integrator? Would that structure help you get more of what you want from your business? We got other tools for you there. Check those out and become a part of our visionary integrator community. So with all that, this is it for this episode, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, go Rocket. Make huge leaps on your journey towards EOS mastery by joining us at the 2025 EOS Conference in Washington, D.C. Happening April 2nd through 4th, the week will feature engaging breakout sessions, ample network opportunities, and can't-miss keynotes from Gino Wickman and the best-selling author of Atomic Habits, James Clear. Our biggest event of the year, this is the place to connect with other business leaders, learn from entrepreneurial experts, and strengthen your implementation of EOS tools. Go to eosconference.com to register now.